Well, this morning I'm here with Ralph Renzetti, and he's from Scarborough, Ontario. We're down in the basement in his model railroad room and workshop. And we're going to talk a little bit today about his interest in model railroads and some of the interesting things he's done in the hobby lately. So, Ralph, maybe we could start a little bit about how you got involved in the hobby.
It started a while back. My dad bought me a train set, and I never lost interest. Just sort of put it away for a while life got in the way, and
Yep.
now that I'm retired, it's coming out big time. I guess I could say it's my layout at the moment is in its infancy. It's under construction.
Mm-hmm.
I've tried to finish some pieces off so that you don't have this massive white. It's a never-ending process, and like they say, a layout's never really finished, eh?
No, it's true.
So
I think a lot of us, when we are putting our model railroads together, we get these different stages where you need lots of stuff and you need places to put it.
yeah, well, as you can see, there's lots of stuff and not very much room to put it. In the near future, I plan on taking out this wall, possibly, or at least behind it, so I can expand that way. I'm looking forward to that because it'll give me more room. My little work area that I have here now, I'll have a bigger area on the other side and better lighting, and I plan on using the LED lights in here. And but right at the moment, I'm happy and I'm plugging along, and I'm doing it all myself. It's like some guys have groups of guys come in and help. I mean, I would like that, but I'm too fussy.
Yes.
About the details, so I'm doing it all myself.
Well, that's okay.
I'm taking ideas from people,
Yeah.
and incorporating them, but it's all my stuff here. The rock work. When we put in the rock garden in the back, I have 2.5 ton of stone that we ended up getting from a supplier. And as I was putting it in, I thought, geez, this would make good rock work for a layout. So I started making molds. So I have a ton of latex molds, and I sort of interweave them as I go along. You know, cut a piece here, cut a piece there, fit it in. So all the rock work basically is from my back garden. There's a few Woodland Scenics molds around, but they just don't make enough of them that are different. So I've got my own.
Yeah. Well, it's very interesting when you look around the layout here. You can see that a lot of the applications are not out of the box. For you, there's obviously an important part of the hobby to take whatever's out there and make it your own.
Oh yeah, yeah. The one thing about my layout is it's no particular place or time, and the time thing has changed over the last couple of years. I originally started out as 1955 to 65, something like that. And then I started getting all these large, like recent engines. The interest was just really towards the modern stuff, and I thought, well, how the hell do I do that now? So maybe once I get operating, maybe today it'll be 1965.
Yes.
Next month it'll be 1972, or whatever, and you just keep changing, and then you bring out the engine that's appropriate.
Well, it's. I think there's a lot of people that are moving there towards that nowadays too, because I think the hobby was locked into that steam diesel transition period for a long period of time. And a lot of the people that were modeling, that was what they remember from their youth. But there is such a wonderful thing that's happening these days in the manufacturing business when you look at all these brand new 60-foot, 85-foot cars and the ultra-modern stuff that when you actually walk out and look at the prototype today, that's what you can now put in your basement.
Yeah.
And that phenomena is changing, I think, the way people look at their hobby.
I I like the stuff that they're coming out with, the really big cars and so on, the modern stuff. But I don't think they would look right on my layout because I don't have the big, wide curves like a large layout has.
Yeah.
My smallest radius is 22 inches.
Mm-hmm.
They just wouldn't look right on it. So
Yeah.
I'm keeping them down to about 60-foot cars, no more than that.
Yeah.
But everything else, it seems to fit fine.
Well, as you were moving along in the hobby, I took note in how we met, actually. I think it was a while back. I had noticed that you'd taken a particular interest in the weathering of locomotives and rolling stock. I guess everybody has their specific passion in the hobby, but it strikes me that this is something that's pretty near and dear to you.
Yep. It started out, when I started to do my layout, I was actually in the crawl space.
Mm-hmm.
It was a dog bone, J shape. And the chair you're sitting in actually was the chair that I used to get into the crawl space, because when you sit up in that chair, you were that far from the roof rafters, or
Yes.
the ceiling, which was great because you just roll around in there. You never had to stand up. Then I started looking at all the magazines, Model Railroader magazine and some of the others. And the front pages and all the stuff inside was all pristine, like it just came out of the box.
Mm-hmm. Probably did.
Looking like a toy,
Yeah.
right? So I thought, there's got to be a way. I mean, you go outside, you don't see that in the real world, so
Yes.
how do I do it? I joined a group called Model Trains Weathered,
Mm-hmm.
which is no longer on the internet. But those guys shared a lot of information with me, and I learned a lot from them. And now I weather all my cars and engines, and I do it for customers as well.
So your hobby's become a small business that and so when now you get the joy of practicing what you like to do, but you get to do it on other people's stuff.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
And you know, when I started, I ended up, I guess it was the engine in behind here. It's a Broadway Limited Mikado.
Yes.
And I thought to myself, there's an engine I just paid like $300-400 for. There is no way in hell that I'm going to make that thing dirty.
Right.
Nowadays, I haven't got to it yet, but
Yes.
it's going to get a good job. I have no problem with it anymore.
Yeah.
I can look at something, I'll take a prototype picture and go from there.
So the process that you use in this whole idea of taking something from an out-of-the-box model to a finished weathered locomotive or piece of rolling stock, it obviously involves, as you say, the research behind the car initially, as you said.
Yeah.
But also, I guess you have to look at the vast array of materials that are out there that you could potentially use for the car to get the effect you want. Then you have to figure out a way to apply it and then to finish it off so that it'll stand up over time.
Yep.
How did you develop these methods and techniques to move through that process?
My initial involvement, or I guess what I learned, was using oil paints.
Yes.
You make a thin wash with burnt umber, burnt sienna, whatever, and you let capillary action take its course, and it finds all the crevices and lines and so on. Well, I learned that from the owner of my local hobby shop.
Yes.
But that, after a while, wasn't cutting it for me. It wasn't enough.
And that technique is something you probably see a lot of in military modeling, and
that's where
it comes from?
Expertise lies.
Right.
But I stole a lot of stuff from the military guys. The materials that I use now. I use the AK interactive washes and stuff like that.
What is that specifically, AK interactive washes?
It's a solvent-based wash, and it's meant for like I said, the military. But they have specific colors for specific models and country type applications. And I don't look at that as far as, I just look at the color.
Mm-hmm.
And then I try, I get the opportunity. I can try it down there at the hobby shop and see if the color's right. And if I like it, I bring it home and I use it on my models, and it's really showing up really well now.
Yes. What would you say is its defining feature that makes it different than other methods?
Before I was applying gouaches, which are water-based watercolors in a toothpaste type form,
Mm-hmm.
and water-soluble oils in a tube, applied with sponges, and that works for the most part, and I still use that. But with these AKs, you paint it on with a brush. You don't have to be particular about how you do it. But then you go back with mineral spirits on a brush.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost like a dry brush. You dip it in the mineral spirits and then on a rag so you get most of it off. And then go on the model and start dragging it down. In a lot of cases, like the cattle models, you can take the running boards off. On Atlas, you can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
So that restricts the direction you're brushing it. If without the running board, you go right from top to bottom and you drag it, and you take that wash off, but it doesn't come off completely.
Right.
So you can manipulate it, right? So and depending on how slow you go, it takes off more
Mm-hmm.
when you go slow.
So I guess what you end up with is a really nice gradual transition from the grooves, if you wish,
Yeah,
to the upper surfaces where most of it in reality would kind of wash off.
that's right. So and I use it to add that layer of grime that you would get on your car.
Okay.
Or whatever. And then from there I'll start using the oils and the gouaches and so on. But
Yes.
once I got the general grime on the car, I have the choice of leaving it like that,
Mm-hmm.
or if I have the prototype picture that's really beaten up, then I'll work to that picture.
So you could use the oils more for establishing things like rust spots and
Yeah.
specifically
with the
bad
gouaches.
stains.
The
Yeah.
gouaches go on with a sponge,
Yeah.
makeup sponge, and they're easy to get. You get them at the dollar store now.
Yes.
I just rip them apart. This one here, my wife picked up for me, and it's the shape of an arrowhead.
Yes.
But normally they come in a package and just rip them apart, and then you get an irregular surface,
Mm-hmm.
and it works really well.
Yeah. So you end up making, you have like a pool of this stuff when you're applying it. It's like a thin wash, and you dab the sponge, and then you just tap it onto the model.
Yeah, and the sponge is usually dampened with windshield washer fluid from your car.
Oh, that's
And
great.
it sort of cuts the surface tension as you're going along, right?
So this is for things like water-based acrylics, or do
Yeah.
you? But you don't use that in the oil per se. Yeah.
I do mix it
Oh,
with the
okay.
oils too.
Yeah.
When I'm making the oil wash,
Yeah.
that's another form of wash I use. Before I started with the AKs, I mix, and you're gonna laugh. Water-soluble oils,
Mm-hmm.
gouaches, which are water-based, and microsol.
Okay.
And you really got to mix it up because
Yes.
the oil it wants to resist mixing, but it will eventually. And then you apply it with a brush, and you take it off with the
With the sponge.
and it leaves that thin layer of grime.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can go over it a couple of times, it's how clean you want it.
Yeah.
But you'll never get it all off unless you
Right.
wash it off completely.
Well, that's quite interesting. And so now you talked a little bit about the materials and applications. When you've finished getting this all on the model, do you seal it, or is there
Dull coat.
you really have to seal it, I guess.
Dull coat.
Yeah. It protects the finish.
And the only reason I'm using the dull coat is I tried different things.
Mm-hmm.
I use powders as well. I use AIM powders. Some
Mhm.
guys use Bragdon powders, and I also have the pan pastels.
Yeah.
I find the aim powders a little easier to work with. They're similar to the Bragdon. They're pure pigment, and when you scrub them on, it doesn't come off.
Right.
But I still seal it, because a lot of guys use pastels, and they look great as long as you don't touch it. And that's what got me. I want to be able to touch it. What happens if I have a derailment? I have to put it back on the rails again. So I use dull coat, a thin layer of dull coat. I mix it 50-50 with thinner.
Right. So you use it
Put it
through
on
an
with
airbrush.
Yeah. And I buy it in bottles. I don't buy it in the rattle can.
Right.
Just spread just a thin layer.
Yeah.
Anytime you handle something, you're gonna take something off. But with the dull coat, it just locks it in.
So, like everybody, I guess, when you're starting in this, you would probably have started by using inexpensive cars that you didn't really care about, and you experimented and
Garage
played.
sale stuff.
Yeah, and then once you got the effects you wanted, you started applying it to your more expensive pieces of rolling stock.
Well, even I don't have them out here now, but I love the blue box stuff.
Yeah.
You can take a blue box car and do a weathering job on it, and I've got to the point where I like it so much I'll just put a new set of trucks on it and KD couplers, and I'm good to go.
Yeah.
And you can't tell the difference whether it's an expensive car or not unless you look really close.
That's a very interesting point. I mean, some people they look at each piece of rolling stock and they think they fool themselves to some degree that they have to have the nicest ones to make it work for you. But probably with the right amount of weathering and making it look realistic and less toy-like, you end up populating your layout with without great expense, but getting the same effect. Mm-hmm. Because I think once your layout gets to the point when you get whole trains running, you're not looking at individual cars anymore. The trains are minimized by the scene, and the only thing in the car you're really interested in, if you're operating, is maybe the car number in your switching card or something like that.
You don't see it. So
yeah.
My plan is not to heavily weather everything.
Right.
And as Train Masters TV, because I have a few videos there, they labeled it as extreme weathering. And yes, to major degree, when I do engines and so on, it's extreme weathering. Mm-hmm. But I also do light weathering.
Right.
And to do a whole layout of extreme weathering, I think would be too much.
Right.
So you have strategically placed cars that are extremely weathered. Mm-hmm. Ones that probably everybody's seen on the rails.
Yes.
You know?
Well, as you say, you usually use a photographic picture to base it on.
And once you've got a consist together, the engine's weathered to some degree, whether it's extreme or mild. And the end of the train will be weathered. But in the middle, when you're operating, you're not going to see it.
No.
Especially when it's going by. You're going to look at the engine, you're going to look at the tail.
In fact, you can have a clean, unweathered car in there and you don't really notice it. Yeah.
That's right.
You're not going to suddenly say, what happened there? You forgot to weather a car.
Yeah. So on my layout, I'm going to have a weathering shop.
I got a question though. Here you are progressing along, learning something that you really enjoy, and you're experimenting with it. Suddenly it became, well, not suddenly, but it developed into a small business. How did that happen? I mean, here you are working away in your basement, having fun, and that fun can now be shared with other people that are interested in paying money to have you sit
Yeah.
down and do it.
It started about 5 years ago.
Yeah.
I was out at a hobby shop in Grimsby, and I wanted to get my name out there, so I offered the owner,
Mm-hmm.
do you have an engine that I can weather for you, or some cars? And he wanted an engine done. So he gave me Southern Pacific
Mm-hmm.
AC 6000, and he said, sock it to it.
Mm-hmm.
Just lay on the grime. So I did. I went crazy with it, and that engine is on my business card.
Oh, okay.
That's the only time I get to see it now, is on my business card, because I you mentioned about the Norfolk Southern one this morning being my best job yet. I still think that Southern Pacific one was the best one. I mean, it's close, but it's a different style of weathering,
Yes.
where it had the burn marks and so on the paint.
Yep.
My only problem with doing this for customers is my babies leave me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't see them too often anymore.
Got to take lots of pictures.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And
Yeah.
that was the first one I did that went to someone else, the Southern Pacific. And I neglected to take the pictures.
Mm.
So I managed to get him to take a few, and I have those pictures. But now every time I do something, I'll take it outside in the backyard.
Yeah.
I have a little stand to put it on, take pictures of it, little diorama scene.
Yes.
So it's outside, under daylight, take the pictures.
So you did this job for the fellow who owned the hobby shop as, I guess, a bit of a favor. But what made the sort of light bulb go on to say, oh, well, maybe, I could do this more as a business?
A couple of the people that he was dealing with saw his engine.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, that was it. They wanted stuff done. So
Right.
I ended up doing quite a few that way. And I thought, well, this could be a good job.
Yeah.
And I enjoy doing it. So why not?
It takes, obviously, time to do each one, too. But so as a business, it's not something that you can say, I can really develop into something where it's a moneymaker. You're doing it more as a passion and pastime, and you're getting some funds from it. Probably not. You shouldn't have great expectations if you were thinking of doing this.
As far as financially, I wouldn't call it a business.
Right.
But it is, in a true sense, that you're doing it for someone else for fun. So.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not getting paid a whole hell of a lot, and I'm not making a lot of money. So
No.
I'm just doing it, and I'm happy doing it.
I guess it helps pay for the supplies and
It does.
maybe a few additional locomotives or cars here and there.
Well, I've gotten a lot out of it, other than funds. The few of the engines that I have were in lieu of my work, in payment for. My SD40-2 was payment for doing the Southern Pacific,
Yes.
and of course then I went to hell and I weathered that one all. So it's working. I have some of my own done.
Mm-hmm.
I just haven't got there yet. I'm doing the layout more than doing my own stock. But it's a fun thing.
Mm-hmm. So it's not. It never really gets to the point, though, I guess, where that's dominating your time in terms of deadlines so much that you don't have time to do the other things you want to do, or does it get in the way of that?
Life gets in the way.
Yeah.
Life gets in the way. Like my wife is an early riser.
Yes.
I go to bed late. It's 2:00 in the morning when I go to bed, but I don't get down here until after dinner. sometimes 9 o'clock. The rest of the day is the honey-do list and all of that sort of thing. So, or looking after family and
Yeah.
you know. So my time is late in the evening, whether it's working on the layout or doing a model for someone else. My time is well spent. The time that I do have.
I saw another interesting thing when I was looking around the layout room is that you were doing some laser cut structures and also a lot of kit bashing of bridges and things like that.
Oh yeah, kit bashing is a big thing with me.
Yeah.
That started way back when I was doing model cars. I never put a model together from instructions.
Yeah.
It was always what I saw up here. And I'm doing basically the same thing. Microengineering has their long truss bridge.
Yes.
Well, I made that even longer, and by doing that I used a piece of aluminum channel and just put the plate girders on the side of the aluminum channel. My bridge is about 7.5 feet long. It's right over your head. And it goes from a set of pony bridges through to that truss bridge to an arched steel bridge, and then just keeps going.
Yeah.
And because of the bridge theme, I started to do plate girder as my fascia.
That's very interesting. It's all done, I guess, with layered pieces of wood, is it?
Masonite.
Masonite. And the little knobs, they look like the ends that you put over screws in your tables and stuff like that.
Mushroom buttons.
The mushroom buttons. And the color is phenomenal. It looks just like a girder plate bridge.
It's all house latex paint that I've had colored by computer.
Right. So you just identify the color that's going to be appropriate, and you get them to make up a little jar of it for you as a test jar, right? Yeah.
And I don't have to go out and buy the quart for $4 to get a little 4 ounce bottle. And
yeah.
So far I've done half the fascia on this thing, and I still haven't gone to half the bottle.
Is that right? Wow.
So I don't have to waste paint that way.
Well, it sure gives a very special look to the railroad and finishes it nice. Maybe what we can do is have a little tour of the upper deck here and see some of the more interesting projects that you're working on right now.
Okay.
Not often do people get to see a railroad when it's in its construction phase. A lot of times they're a near finished product, or somebody's madly gone about cleaning up an area for a visit. But I think that what you got here represents what most people are, what stage they're at. And within that, you can see all the potential that it has. So let's go have a look at that.
Now, I've had a little bit of help in doing this.
Yeah.
A friend of mine who owns, imagine that, Laser Art, has laser cut the name for me. And you'll see it in the fascia. My layout is called 40 Creek Railroad. And that's thanks to you introducing me to 40 Creek whiskey.
Well, isn't it nice to have a product like that out there being represented in a fine model railroad?
I even sent an email to the fellow that makes the 40 Creek.
Yes.
John, I forget his last name now. Anyway, asking him if it was okay if I used the name for my railroad. I never got a response, so I figured that's good.
It probably is. He was probably saying that this is not something that's going to interfere with his sales, that's for sure.
Well, if anything, it might increase his sales. You never know.
Let's go have a look.
Okay.